Hey, everybody. So let's just start by talking about what existentialism and absurdism are. I know that this is the very first module of the class, and so we are looking at Kierkegaard. We're going to be talking about Sartre in the next week or so and the basic concepts. But let's just start with what we are talking about in this class and why it's important to sort of begin with an overview of the whole concept of existentialism and the whole concept of absurdism and absurdist theater. So, to begin with, as you're going to see, or as you may have already seen with Kierkegaard, the idea of philosophy takes a step away from sort of what we would call predetermined existence, right? That we exist, but we have no real role to play within our history, right? Wars happen, and natural disasters happen, and all of this sort of happens because there is a predetermined existence that everybody's going to have, right? We don't really determine what to do and how history will move forward. Existentialism, as sort of it's promoted by Kierkegaard, says that we actually do have a free will, right? A way to move forward, and a way to sort of determine our own identities and our own place in history, right? That our existence is defined by us. We are not defined by the things that surround us, right? This is a move forward from a lot of literary movements, which really sort of explained that, when you were born into a certain family, into a certain time period, into a certain set of circumstances, that you could fight all you wanted against those circumstances, but overall, you weren't going to be able to move past them, right? You see this a lot in writers like Émile Zola and Honoré de Balzac and others within the French sphere. And Kierkegaard says, oh no, you do have a way to move forward. You can create your own existence. You are fighting against things, for sure, right? You are fighting against your milieu, right? You're fighting against your class. You're fighting against your family history. You're fighting against, sort of where you're born and into what circumstances. That is, of course, a true thing. But that there is still a great deal of self-determination that happens, right? The absurdist portion of this particular philosophical movement does draw a little bit from this, right? You do still have this idea that we, excuse me, do determine what we are and what we do. Absurdism, however, layers on top of all of that understanding of free will, that understanding of the fact that we determine our own self-worth and our own actions. But it says as well that when we look around, right, our lives will often also be defined by the fact that we can't expect anything from the world, right? The world owes us nothing. The world will often give us, the not necessarily even the opposite of what we're expecting. It just simply will not give us a rational response to the things that we're looking for, right? Camus refers to this as sort of the idea of a divorce, right? That the divorce between what we expect and what we receive is properly, right, that chasm in the middle is, properly speaking, what the absurd is. And we can extend this, right, to a lot of our media, even, that we perhaps are watching now. What is humor? Humor is often that difference between what we're expecting to happen and what does happen, right? But tragedy also can be a little bit more, but tragedy sort of follows a pattern. You do a certain set of things, and then what follows is sort of what you deserve, right? And so tragedy is, speaking, about of Shakespearean tragedy, right? When you watch a Shakespearean play, when you read, a tragedy, something that's referred to as a tragedy in the Greek or the Shakespearean sense, you see people making the mistakes that are going to lead them to the end that is expected of them, right? Comedy is a lot less predictable and often relies on some absurdism and some absurd circumstances where we've been building and planning for this one thing, and then the result is completely the opposite, or a completely random set of circumstances that we don't expect. So when we look at existentialism and absurdism, this is what we're looking at, right? The first part of this class is going to largely depend on our understanding of how people make their own decisions and are responsible for their own actions. Now, what happens after this is often not determined by the person, right? But anything that they do, they can be held responsible for. That is, very properly speaking, the Sartrean understanding of it, right? The Kierkegaardian understanding of it that we're going to be seeing first says that, yes, that's also the case, but that for Kierkegaard, this is why a reliance on God, why a reliance on, a spiritual, guidance is so important, because our being able to handle and to feel, as if life is worth living often is dependent on, being understanding that we're forgiven, that we have grace in circumstances where we've made mistakes. Sartrean, right, existentialism does not allow for that sort of, forgiveness. It simply says responsibility, responsibility, responsibility. That's all, right? That you can be judged for everything that you do. And then the absurdism that sort of comes later is going to be that no matter how responsible we are, sometimes things happen that we don't necessarily expect to happen, right? And sometimes these can be funny things, right? Absurdism can be very funny, but sometimes it can also lead to what we refer to as sort of an alienation, right? That we realize that no matter what we do, there is no set response that we can expect, even as hard as we've worked, right? Can it be somewhat depressing? Sure, absolutely. But can it be something as well that allows us to have sort of a strange amount of, rebellion that sort of keeps us moving? Well, Camus is going to talk about that in a while. So for this particular video, right, what I'm hoping that you're going to take away from this is just simply these are sort of the definitions we're looking at. We're going to look at them more closely, right, as we go into weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, right, and sort of build out our understanding of what existentialism is. But that's sort of in a nutshell why we are doing what we are doing, right, and why the books and the plays that I've chosen are important, right? We're going to see this played out in literature, and we're going to be looking at it very much as a philosophy. How do we feel, and how do we react to these things? Do we understand sort of what is happening in light of the fact that a lot of these people are writing and are living in a society where these philosophies are very current? These philosophies are very, important. Do we have anything like that today in our society? I think we've moved a lot into a set of media-heavy absurdism, right? I think a lot of what we've seen with TikTok, with YouTube, with Instagram, with a lot of sort of the I guess, quote-unquote, brain rot sort of things that we see on in media today is somewhat of an absurdist, right, a take on society, right? What you expect to see in a video is not always what you get, to the point where now, when we watch a video, we may come to expect the unexpected. And, is it sort of twisting things around when a video goes exactly the way that you think it's going to? We can talk about that. Maybe that's something that you'll want to take a look at for your own projects at the end of the semester. But there you go. So I've hit about 10 minutes, so I'm going to end this video here. But this is sort of where we're beginning this semester. So more to come.